Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be an amazing episode. I've been so looking forward to talking to my brother. I've been hooked on this show on TV. I'm not going to mention now. We'll talk about it later. But we're going to be talking about building your legacy, building your brand, enjoying life, but having fun while doing the same thing, while also enjoying your life, living a life and enjoying it. My brother Joe is formerly known as the Flip King, and now he is changing people's lives one storage locker at a time. That's the way I would say it. So, brother, how are you doing today? And thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely, man. Richard, I appreciate you having me here, man. I'm a big advocate for our veterans, and I love what you're doing and love a couple of things you shared with me. Before we went live here today, I think there's going to be a lot of synergies in what we're going to talk about.
Well, I'm going to take because you have an amazing podcast. I'm going to be taking major credit because I think I've listened to every episode. So if you're
awesome.
lately, it's because of me. I take
That's
responsibility.
Great.
I love your podcast. Now you're also a CEO. You also know what it's like to be a veteran. So we have a lot in common. But first, before I forget, like I said, I got a TBI.
Yep.
What is your definition of resiliency?
I used to do this as part of a keynote that I did, but I always compare, really, really resilient CEOs and entrepreneurs to Conor McGregor, right? Like what makes Conor McGregor, arguably the best UFC fighter in history. And, you could really kind of like quantify the best in various different forms, but let's just say he's one of the top UFC fighters in UFC history. What makes him the best? He's not undefeated. He's not, he's a great marketer. He sells tickets. The whole thing is just amazing. But at the end of the day, what does he do really well? He's not afraid to get punched in the face. This guy has been knocked out. He's been choked out. He's broken legs during the fight. He puts himself out there and he bounces back every single time. Now, fast forward a few years since I started using this analogy, and what happened? The guy's now put on like 40 pounds of lean mass, and now he's trying to come back in the fight scene and do a different weight class and be a 3-time different champion in 3 different weight classes. But that's what it's like to be a resilient entrepreneur. It's not about whether, you're celebrating your success or you're posting pictures on Instagram. And yeah, you can have a happy life, but in order to get that happy life, you have to be willing to get punched in the face over and over and over and over again and solve bigger problems and get back in the ring with bigger opponents. And I think that's kind of one of the best analogies I can think of is, everyone thinks it's pretty and it's beautiful and everything's all hunky dory and successful people just smile all day long. No, they're just used to being punched in the face to the point where, it becomes normal.
And, I'm a big UFC guy. At the end of the week, we're having Ken Shamrock. He's going to be coming on, hanging out on the show.
That's awesome.
But, Conor McGregor, we see all this success, but a lot of people don't know where he came from. They don't remember when his wife was his girlfriend supporting him while he worked out three times a day. So sometimes I think we forget where we come from. And especially as veterans, when we get out of the military, we forget we were badasses at one point in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Military spent millions of dollars on us, training us to be killers. And then when we get out, we kind of forget where we once were. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So talk about a little bit about, where you come from, where'd you grow up? Give us a quick down and dirty about you.
Yeah, simple answer to that is I'm a product of construction industry. My parents were divorced at a really young age. When I was a really little kid, my dad had me in nights and weekends, and I would 90% of the time, where would I be nights and weekends? This guy worked 7 days a week, so it would be on the job site. I'd be walking around the construction site. As soon as I was able to pick up a hammer, I probably could tape drywall by the time I was 10 or 12 years old at a pretty good, pretty effective rate. And I was just always in construction. I grew up learning to respect the work that goes into it, the energy, the blood, sweat, and tears, but also I love the outcome. I love the product. Like I love turning, a building lot into a house or renovating a kitchen and seeing something turn, really, really beautiful as a part of our hard work and effort and creativity. And so like that's been invested in me my entire life. I just loved, I love construction. I actually was lucky enough to, fast forward to after high school, I got to go build, stuff in the military. I got to become a U.S. Navy Seabee, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, that's a construction battalions of the Navy. I got to go into the Navy and do the stuff that I've been doing my whole life and love doing, and travel the world doing it and build really, really cool projects all over the world. So to me, it's always been about your creation and building and leaving something better than how I found it.
All right. So now my dad, my stepfather, which I call my dad, he just passed away on Valentine's Day. My dad is off the boat Italian, right off the boat from Sicily, hard worker, working 6 days a week.
Yep.
Off, working 2 jobs, painting houses, doing whatever he had to do to pay the bills. So, and, being from the East Coast, being from Jersey, if you say the Italians and then you say buildings, you're kind of like, all right, so is it, So talk to us about having that work ethic, because I think whether it's 2022 or 1982, if you have a great work ethic, you're going to surpass so many people just by having that work ethic, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And I kind of love that you asked that question, because my dad's side of the family are both straight off the boat from Sicily as well. My grandparents came here from Sicily in the 1940s, I believe, 30s or 40s. And, they were always employees. They were 9-to-5 workers. They had W-2 jobs their entire lives. And, my grandmother was the lunch lady across the street from high school that was across the street from her house. And I went to go to that school and got to see her every day at lunch. And my grandfather, who was actually passed away long before I was born, was an insurance salesman. So my dad went to college for 1 semester, and he decided really quickly he wants to be an entrepreneur. Just wasn't cut out for the college life, for the education thing, didn't want to be a CPA or a doctor or attorney or anything like that. So he dropped out of college and basically went and started a drywall company before I was born. And, I think that his work ethic is really what drove me when I was younger. Now, I tend to mess around with him a lot, because I think that he worked really, really hard and maybe not as smart. He's one of my best friends, by the way, so I kind of jokingly break his balls. But the reality of it is, my whole goal in life when I was a kid was to maybe take over the company one day and run a general contracting firm. And about 5, 6, 7 years into starting our businesses, we ended up buying his company and sending him on an early retirement. So, I think the work ethic is very, very important. But I think the focus on what's important is just as important as grinding. Like, just grinding for the sake of grinding really doesn't get you the outcome you want. I've learned that the hard way. I learned that learning to work harder up here is really where the real true, success and time freedom and financial freedom comes from.
Okay, now I had a guy come on the show. He got out of the life. I'm going to say the life. And he's an entrepreneur now, and he told me, he said, if you want to find out what real entrepreneurship is like, watch The Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 for a business perspective, not all the other stuff. And a lot of it came down to you in the life that we grew up in, old school, you did what you said you were going to do. You did it on time or before time. And a lot of it was just done with a handshake. And I think we've lost a lot of that, to where if I said, I want you to come on the show and I'm going to promote you on 10 different platforms. When we get off the show, I'm going to promote you on 15 different platforms. Because I believe, like David Meltzer said, and this Mr. Steve Sims talks about, is under promise and always over deliver.
Absolutely.
So talk about that, especially your dad. I'm sure that when he put in the work, I'm sure that he put in quality work, and he didn't skip he didn't skip any corners.
No, absolutely. I mean, he was anal retentive about the quality of the job site and making sure it was swept up every day. And I think the ancillary things go a long way. We have a saying in my office: how we do one thing is how we do everything. Right. And I mean, that can be argued a lot of different directions, but the reality of it is, look, if you're a sloppy person at home, if you're a sloppy person with your car, then you're probably sloppy at how you do your job too. Right. It's all a combination. I think if you take care of yourself and you eat right and you pay attention to outcomes, your business is going to start to flow that way. And the reality of it, Richard, is I learned the hard way that's true. I started and failed at my first company. It didn't fail, but didn't. We transitioned out of it because I had looked at myself. We had about 45 people on our team. This is going back 6, 7 years. Didn't have the culture I loved. Didn't have the people I loved. didn't have the right people on the right seats on the bus. And the reality of it is we had really good people. Like when I tell this story, a lot of people think, oh, well, he's trashing his people. My people were great. What my people lacked was great leadership. And I took it for granted that, being the owner of a company, that I should just be able to walk around and do and say whatever I want, whenever I want, and expect my people to put the effort in. The reality of it is it's the opposite. We've now transitioned to a much smaller team, and we do 10 times the revenue and 10 times the profit. And it's a byproduct of us putting in the work and being good leaders and showing up and showing people what it takes to work hard and solve problems, and then expecting them to do the same thing. Because you can't expect people to do things that you don't put in the time and effort yourself to do, right?
Yeah, man, and that's something like my friend Gary Vaynerchuk talked about this week. He said, if you're a business owner and you expect your employees to treat the business the same way that you do, you're going to go out of business.
And that's true too. Yeah,
This doesn't happen.
Yep.
All right, so let's hop back in. Let's hop back real quick because I love to hear everybody's recruiting story. So, what was it like walking into a recruiting story, especially having your last name? I'm sure that had to be fun going through basic training.
Oh man, so I got a kind of crazy story. I don't even know how much of it I can just divulge, but let's put it to you this way: I went in for one singular purpose, and that was to become a U.S. Navy Seabee. I had actually been turned on to the Navy. Before the Navy, I was actually going to the Marine Corps. I just thought, hey, if I'm going to be a badass and shoot guns, the Marine Corps is the best place to do it. And I was actually kind of converted by, at the time, it was the foreman that worked at my dad's office. I worked for him when I got out of high school. Nights and even in high school, I was working part time, and he was my boss, and worked for my dad. And he was a retired senior chief Navy reservist. And so he basically said to me, you could be a Seabee. Like you could go do construction and work with the Navy. And I was like, what is that? So he explained it to me, and I was like, man, I'm in. If I can do that, if I can do what I'm doing now and wear a uniform, I'm in. And so my experience with the recruiter is I went in there headstrong and said, I'm only signing up if you'll make me a Seabee. And, they basically took the ASVAB and, of course they tried to make me a nuke and they tried to make me every other thing in the world because of my scores. And I said, nope, I'm going to be a Seabee. So then eventually I made it to the point where I went to the MEPS, the Military Processing Center in Philadelphia. And it was kind of a hurry up and wait kind of thing. It was like 9 hours of weigh-ins and, body analysis and, questionnaires and the whole in-doc procedure. And by the time I left there, they had signed me up to be a helicopter mechanic because they had talked me into it. They were like, there's no other rates available for the Seabees. You can't be a Seabee right now. If you're going to join the Navy, you got to be a helicopter mechanic. And so I left MEPS signing up as a helicopter mechanic. And between me and the senior chief boss of mine calling the E5 recruiter that recruited me in and him chewing him out a few times and basically saying like, Joe's not going in unless he has a Seabee rating on his sleeve. And this guy was trying to say like, look, he's already signed up. It's too late. So I don't know if it got to a point where a warrant went out for my arrest, but at some point I didn't show up and they called me up one day and I was supposed to leave in like 3 months. And he called me up one day and he goes, all right, listen, kid, I only got this one opportunity, this one shot, and you better take it. And I'm like, okay, what is it? He goes, I got you a builder rating. I got you, you're going to be a Seabee. I go, what's the catch? He goes, you have to be on the bus in 48 hours. So I was like, okay. Now I had an apartment. I had a girlfriend. I had a dog. I had all my crap in my apartment. I had a job. I had to quit. I hadn't even told my mom that I joined the Navy yet when this phone call came in. Right. And so I literally packed it all up, moved it all into my dad's basement, gave my dog to my father, who he stayed with him for 10 years before he passed away. Called my mom and told her I joined the Navy. She was freaking out because she had no idea I was even thinking about the military. And long story short, I got my builder rate. I went in as a Seabee. I went to basic. I absolutely love basic. I know it's kind of crazy, but it really helped me got me disciplined, helped me lose a lot of weight. They actually had me on double rations by the time I left the boot camp. I think I was 220 when I went in, and I was like 165 when I graduated. I'd lost so much weight from working out consistently, and I was also I was what they called the master of arms inside boot camp. So what would happen was anything that happened inside of the ship or inside of the berthing was my responsibility. So if somebody got in trouble for having stuff in their locker or having stuff hidden in their bed, they would always go to extra PT. Well, I always had to go with them. So I know people think I'm joking, but I think I was doing 2-a-days about 6 days a week the whole entire time I was in boot camp. So I couldn't eat enough to keep the calories on my body because I was working out so much and not sleeping. But I actually really quite enjoyed it. I thought it was, like I said, good for discipline, good for the outcome. And, as crazy as it sounds, I had a lot of fun.
So you were pretty much doing 75 hard before it was 75.
That's
It was like
pretty
100,
much.
150 hard.
Yeah. 75 hard. If I could have bread and brown sugar as dessert every single night, that's pretty much what I did. And they had me on double rations. I was able to stay in the cafeteria twice as long as my entire squad because I needed to eat more, which was nuts. But now I got the opposite problem.
Something that you said is, because like my T-shirt says, "Today I decide." Today I decide are the three most important words in the English language, because you made that decision to go, and if you probably didn't make that decision, you wouldn't be the man that you are today. So sometimes I think, like my friend James Clear wrote the book Atomic Habits. He talks about how you are your decisions, and you are your habits. So have you ever thought back to thinking, man, if I didn't take that, where would my life be now?
All the time. Yeah. I mean, it's, I always had a calling to be an entrepreneur. I always knew I wanted to own a business, but I had an equal calling to serve my country. And so, I've had many friends, obviously, that have retired actually in the last 4 or 5 years. I would have been retired 5 years ago. I often think what would happen if I stayed in the whole time. I don't regret getting out, but I certainly don't regret getting in. I think it changed the trajectory of my business and my life, and my self-awareness, being able to be stuck in tough spots and know that I'm going to get out. I'm going to solve the problem. I'm going to fix it, whatever it might be.
So how many years did you put in total?
Just about 6. Navy starts out as CB started out as 5, and I had to extend like 9 or 10 months to do C school. So I did an advanced builder school after A school. And actually after my first deployment, I think. I don't remember exactly when I did it, but I had to extend for that. And it was one of my last tours was 03. I went into I was in U.S. Central Command. I built Tommy Franks's like head shed. I built the the place where all the generals ran the war. And I was getting out, and I had full intentions of just going into the reserves. And so I called, whoever it was, the detailer that I had to get into the reserves. And he says, hold on to your desert camis, because your entire reserve battalion is deployed to Baghdad right now. So, if you go in reserves, basically you're going right back to the desert. And I had already had a great job lined up and I had an offer. So, I probably would have retired a reservist if I didn't have to go directly back to the desert after my last deployment.
All right. So you've been deployed, you've been around the world.
Yeah.
So you can't wait to get in. You're so pumped to become a CB. What was that decision to get out? What made you? Because a lot of us, like for me, I was a lifer. I consider a lifer a lazy, ignorant fuck expecting retirement. So I did 23 years. I got hurt, or else I would have done 30. So what was the thought process in you getting out, and how before you got out did you start planning?
Yeah, I'd really decided ahead of time, because I was lucky enough, honestly, to have a TS security clearance. I was Yankee white. I worked for the president for a couple of years, so that really offered an expanded viewpoint of what was available to me. Before I had gotten out, so. There was quite a few people that had done that ahead of time, went and worked for big government contracting firms. And at that time, the combination of having a Yankee white security clearance and having construction background was extremely desirable, because, this was at the time where we're just getting into the war. All the government contracts are ramping up. We're building our infrastructure. We're building our support teams, stateside. And so there was just tons and tons of money being thrown into that space. And, I first made the decision. I got this, kind of great offer to go work at the Defense Intelligence Agency for Kellogg Brown and Root, which was a Halliburton company. And, I was about to take it, and I was extremely excited about it. And it was almost too good to be true. And I was in Guam at the time when I got the offer. I do remember this. And my XO, because I was, I don't want to say I was fast tracked, but like I was making really good moves in the military. I could have fast tracked pretty quickly up to, higher ranking, positions, and I was on that track. But I was leading up a deployment in Guam and a det in Guam, and I got this offer, and I remember telling one of my superiors, I don't know who it was, one of my senior chiefs, and like the following afternoon, the XO like summoned me to his office. you know, and I was like, oh boy, like what the heck's going on here? I'm in trouble. I just can keep in mind, I don't think I've said 2 words to this guy the entire time that he was my XO for 2.5 years. And so I get summoned to his office and he sits me down and he goes, tell me what's going on. And I was like, what do you mean, sir? And he's like, yeah, I just heard yesterday that you're planning on getting out. And I said, well, I said, I really wrestled with it. I'd really love to be a lifer. And, at the end of the day, this is the offer I got. And he took one look at me and he goes, take it and run, because it was just an amazing offer, not just financially, but with the group I was in and the location I was in and the package and the healthcare and all kinds of things. And, so at that moment when he said take it, it was like, it was kind of a confirmation that it was the right move for me. And so, I believe in our life that we get a lot of opportunities placed in front of us, and it's our job to make that, like you said, today I decide. It's our job to make the right decision when opportunities get presented to us. And I think I took the right move at that moment.
Okay, so I love that, but a lot of us, like me, I got hurt on duty. I can't see because I lost my vision. I can't shoot, so you don't need me anymore. And, after getting thrown out of the military the first time for being a drug addict, and then getting back in the military and becoming Soldier of the Year and all that good stuff, once they finally told me, well, you're no longer Sergeant Kaufman. Well, if I'm not Sergeant Kaufman, well, who am I?
Yeah.
And a lot of us, and that was the day I attempted suicide, Memorial Day 2012. But a lot of us, when we get out, we are so caught up in being whatever rank we are that when we get out, like my friend Sergeant Nick Valentine's talks about, when you step off base, the military doesn't give a shit about you. Your phone stops ringing. You no longer have a mission. And a lot of us, you no longer have money coming in. So really, you're dealing with a 3-headed monster when you get out. Now, a lot of that you can deal with, but I'm sure because you deal with a lot of veterans, you do a lot of great things that we'll talk about in a little bit. So, have you seen that from other people that have gotten out?
Oh, of course. I think my transition was a very lucky transition. In that I already had something waiting for me, and I don't take that lightly. I think that was extremely important part of, why I made the transition, was because I knew I had a team and a group of people that I had known a few of them that I was going to work for. But I can also extremely empathize. There's the word. Empathize with those that are transitioning and don't have a plan. I think that it's come a long way since I've gotten out almost 20 years ago. However, we still have a lot of work to do. I have an intern that works for me right now, which is from a program which is really interesting. And again, they didn't have these things back then when I was getting out, but we actually he's allowed to intern with us as an active duty airman for the last 6 months of his tour. Right, so he had a 4-year tour, 3.5 years in. He says, "Hey, I'm making a transition. I'm going to go work in the real world." And the Air Force placed him with us on full military benefits and pay for 6 months as an intern to basically transition to make that transition a little bit easier. That stuff didn't exist when I was getting out. I mean, I don't even remember my departure interview or anything like that. It was like, hey, go, like you said, go to the office, check in with this person, get your DD-214, and have a nice life. We'll catch you later. I think that we've made a lot of leaps and bounds. I still think that those programs are not a lot of people know about them. I don't know how many people are taking advantage of them. I was turned on to this program by a retired Master Chief friend of mine who used it to hire a few guys to work for him. And so I think those type of programs are extremely necessary in order to relieve some of that. And, again, there's different levels too, right? Like you said, you were blinded, you were hurt, you were dealing with a lot of things that, not a lot of people necessarily are dealing with, but I think everyone has their own different path and their own different challenges when trying to get out and matriculate into the real world.
Okay, so before I want to get deep into how you transitioned out and your first foray into business. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, when I was in the military, and I was also worked with GNC on and off for 30 years. So I used to love pre-workouts, but they all tasted like ass. So I decided to come out with my own coffee. It's called Vertical Momentum Coffee. Twice the caffeine, twice the energy. Tastes amazing. No crash. But the best part of this, every bag that gets sold, 100% of the proceeds go to help veterans struggling with homelessness and PTSD. So if you guys love coffee with a mission, check us out, because 100% of the proceeds go to Project Die Hard, which actually helps veterans. We're building veterans homes, and we're building a place where a veteran and their family can come up and stay for 1 year absolutely free. And that includes healthcare, psychologists, everything free for a year for the veteran and their family. So guys, if you love coffee with a mission, write coffee down below and I'll get that information to you. So now, talk a little bit. Okay, you get out, and the military, we know when we're training, we train until the mission is complete. We don't just go in at 9 o'clock, check in. Half hour later, we're still at the water cooler drinking coffee, talking about football, and then go back to our desk, and then 4 o'clock clock out. So what was that? What discipline did you take from the military? Did you take over into the civilian sector?
Quite a few. But to your point, the idea. So CBs have a saying that what is difficult will happen immediately. What is impossible might take a little longer, right? So what we can do, what's difficult, we do it once, and what's impossible might take a little longer. The concept there, though, is that CB's motto is "can do." Right? It's going to get done. It doesn't matter what it takes. It doesn't matter how it works. And one of the things that was brought to my attention, kind of later on in my career, I mean, short career, but was when I did deploy to U.S. Central Command. There was a slew of projects that had to get done, and there were some other detachments that had visited there earlier. And I'm not going to throw anybody else's team under the bus, but we got there and we handled 10 things on the to-do list in 2 weeks. So much so that even the SOCCENT commander came out, the special operations commander came out and was like, "What are you guys doing for the next month? Because you're mine." He kind of stole us away. And that's a product of discipline, work ethic, and can-do spirit, right? It's just, you just figure it out. I think that's, to me, one of the number one things that I carried out of the military, and really one of the reasons why I like surrounding myself with other veterans, is all of us have that mentality, right? You just figure it out. It's part of why we went to boot camp to begin with, where we were broken all the way down and then rebuilt. We were rebuilt in that concept, that construct of you're probably better than you think you are, and solve the problem and figure it out. And I think that's a combination of all the different military forces really have that end game. But when do you actually put it into action? And so for me, I guess I'm kind of talking in circles, but that's what I love about it. I love the can-do spirit, and it's going to get done. There's nothing that's impossible that can't get done.
Okay, so you get out, you start working in corporate America. When did you start getting bit by the entrepreneurial bug?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I've always had that bug. Again, I saw my dad do it, and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I think I probably would have shifted into government contract work for the rest of my life, because, I was getting paid really well. I was enjoying the hell out of it. It was challenging. It was fun. It was opportunistic. And then I met my wife, right? So she was back from New Jersey. She's from New Jersey. We were living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I always had this joke that her umbilical cord's never been cut, right? Because her and her mom can't be apart from each other for more than a couple of days at a time. So she got a job in DC. She moved to DC, and we would come home every Friday night back to New Jersey, and then go back to DC every Sunday night. And we lived in the most amazing part of DC. We lived in an up and coming section called Clarendon. It was just a hot area to be. All the restaurants were awesome. It was just and we were making good money. We had no reason to go back and forth to New Jersey. But after doing that for about 6 months, I said, you know what? We got to come up with another plan. We got to move back. And so we did. We ended up going back to New Jersey. And almost immediately when we came back here, which was probably in 07, actually it was 07, I jumped in 2 feet, started flipping houses, started thinking I was going to take over the world, become a millionaire overnight. And then from there.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
2007. Did you even have an inkling that the shit was hit the literal fan the next year?
You heard me correctly. Yeah, what's interesting? I call it the luckiest time to ever get into real estate. because I firmly believe that the stuff that I learned back then, even knowing nothing, taught me things that are, literally keeping us going in today's market, and will for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 year cycle, whatever it's going to be. Because I learned how to pivot, and I learned how to course correct. And I think that that's really what's missing in a lot of companies that kind of fail or go belly up or whatever you want to call it, is, they're so focused. They say 65% of small businesses fail in the first 3 years. I really believe that's because people say, this is what I do. It's all I know how to do. This is all I'm going to do. And then when shit comes and hits them sideways and they're not expecting it, they're like, I got no other option. And for us, flipping houses was our number one goal. It was go in, buy real estate, make it look better, sell it for a profit, and do it again. And I had gotten about 3 properties deep, Richard, when the economy really fell out from underneath of us. And guess what? I was doing it the old school method. I was putting 20% of my own money down. I was buying the property. I was getting a construction loan to do the renovations. And so luckily enough, we were able to pivot and turn into landlords, right? I put tenants in place. I went back to the bank. I got stable long-term mortgages on the property. We held those properties for years. In fact, I just recently sold them. And what it taught me was, hey, you got to pivot. You got to course correct. However, what I got stuck with is I didn't get my cash back, right? Because I put 20% down. Doesn't mean the bank was giving me my money back. They just gave me the money that they loaned back in a longer term form. So now I had to pivot again. I had to figure out, like, okay, how do I continue to do this? Whether I'm buying rental properties or I'm flipping properties, how do I continue to do this? Because I have no cash left. And that's when we started learning to use private investment money, private lenders, doing deals where, effectively we didn't have our own money out of pocket. And pretty quickly after the market crashed, we were able to kind of correct and start to build a rental portfolio and refinance and pay ourselves enough money to keep going and keep that money in play. And then really started to build a portfolio over the next 5-10 years.
Okay. Now, the good thing about me going blind was I'm able to hear a lot better. So I actually hang on every word that you say. And sometimes I actually count certain words that you say.
Okay.
You said the word pivot 5 times.
Okay.
And that is one of the most important words. Like when I lost my vision, I lost 80% of my vision. So I told my friends I'm going to start a podcast, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, because I can't work. I was with GNC. I can't work, so I'm not going to sit home and do absolutely nothing. So that's how I started the podcast. So I pivoted. I had to pivot. My family still had to eat. We still got a mortgage, and mortgages in New Jersey. So
sure.
I think the companies that don't pivot go out of business. Like I was with GNC, like I said, for almost 30 years on and off. They're on their way out. I was right next door to a Radio Shack. They're gone. I was right next to Sears and Roebuck.
Yep.
They're gone. So if you don't pivot, if you don't learn how to pivot, you're going to be out of business very quickly in this day and economy. Agree?
I couldn't agree more. And I heard it said during COVID, Richard, that sometimes times of adversity teach us what we should have been doing all along. So like a lot of these companies that, COVID hit, it was like, oh my God, adversity, I'm done. Throw up my hands. I can't figure it out. Look, I mean, there's certain industries, like if you ran a restaurant, like it's probably a little bit difficult to pivot, but there's not that many restaurants that survived that didn't learn how to pivot somehow, right? They increased their delivery service, or they changed up seating, or they put it, so they pivoted. The ones that failed, not that they guarantee they all wouldn't have otherwise, but maybe they didn't try to shift, or maybe they didn't shift fast enough. There's a lot of businesses. You see this in I can tell you at this point, March 13th, 2020, I had a sales team of 13 people start that day. That was a Monday. And on Sunday night, we found out that the lockdowns were starting to happen. And in 24 hours, my team had everybody online on Zoom and did all of our calls virtually. We took a 13-man in-office sales team that was supposed to start one day, and 24 hours later, they were working virtually. And guess what that created for us? It created an opportunity for us to now start to recruit in the entire world, not just in New Jersey. Then we started hiring people in Panama and people in South America and people in Colombia and people in California. And next thing you know, within 6 months, my sales team was pretty much the whole North and South America. So that's a pivot that, hey, maybe we should have done 6 months earlier. But when things are easy, we just do what's natural. We're faced with adversity, and you pivot and you course correct. I think those are the businesses that you need to keep an eye on. Those are the ones that are going to sustain no matter what.
Like I had one of the Iron Chefs on, Simon Majumdar, and we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about how, we've lost over 100,000 restaurants in the United States since COVID. He said, but you lost a lot of shitty restaurants.
Yeah.
Some of the
Yeah.
best restaurants, they got even stronger.
Yep.
During COVID. But now let me ask you a question, because, something that my friends Ed Milet and Tony Robbins talk about all the time, the reticulating activating system in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I knew you were coming on, I started noticing self-storage everywhere. I mean, everywhere I looked, somebody was building it. Somebody, like my son's in college right now, so we had to find a place in South Carolina. And when we started looking, there's like hundreds of them. And I can't believe that people got that much shit. They got people like continuously building more. So talk to us, go from the flip king to now doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, easy transition. I kind of mentioned it earlier. In the flip business, we were doing massive volume, and everything was so super transactional. Every check, every outcome, every commission was based on the next sale. And we were doing upwards of 100 flips a year. And every week it's like, are we going to closing on Friday? Is the home inspection in? Is the mortgage commitment in? Is the title clear? Is the buyer ready to go? Is the house ready to go? Are the repairs done on time? And we're just constantly chasing transactions, just transaction after transaction. And I realized years back, me and my business partner, now business partner, he was my COO at the time, sat down like at Q4, and we were like, okay, what do you want to do next year? We're going to do 88 houses this year. What do you want to do next year? You want to do 110, 120? And he looks me dead in the eyes and he's like, Joe, I don't ever want to do 88 again. And I was like, good. I'm glad you said that, because honestly, I felt the same way. We were just getting completely burned out. We had a massive staff. We had massive payroll. We were constantly chasing paychecks. And I wanted to find something that was more sustainable, more scalable, more long-term legacy wealth building, could include the core people in the upside and the equity and the profitability. It's hard when you're flipping houses and you make 25 grand to make, your team have equity. Like, what are they going to get? 5% of that, 3% of that doesn't mean anything. But when you do $25 million projects and they own 1% or 2%, that's a massive change in the potential outcome for their family's legacy. And so that's why we called it Legacy Developers. And we changed it. We switched over to self-storage 100%. We do primarily development ground up. We do a little bit of big box conversion. And going into this kind of recession, whatever you want to call it, we're going to start doing a lot more value add and existing site purchases, because I think that there's going to be a compression there. We'll be able to take advantage of it and create opportunity for our team. So, the storage business in itself, Richard, is just an incredible animal. It's on pace right now to be a $40 billion business, and they think it's going to hit $75 billion in the next 10 years. That's just incredible for it to basically, let's call it almost double again. And it's been on a steady trajectory of growth for the last 40 years. The up and down economy is actually really good for storage. When people upsize and downsize and, move stuff in between, it's always a good place to keep their stuff. And the reality of it is it's not even nearly enough saturated yet. People think like, oh man, everybody's doing it. Everybody's jumping into it. Everybody's getting on board. I think in the next 5 years, we're looking at what apartments went through in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, everybody was talking about multifamily apartments. How do I get involved? That's where we're at with storage right now. This last 12 months for storage has been really, really incredible. But I think we're just getting started in the storage business.
And, now, like I said, my son, he goes to Coastal Carolina. We use storage in South Carolina. And my other son's about to go to Seton Hall University. So I don't think we're going to need storage there. But when I first realized about storage, it was probably about 10 years ago. And a lot of them look like a bunch of shacks. But now everywhere I look, it's like high tech. I mean, it's like not your mother's storage units anymore. Now, somehow I'm watching TV the other night and I put on the show Storage Wars. I don't know why. 11 hours later, I was so enamored with just how many people leave stuff in some of these storage places. So I thought that was pretty amazing that even if you're not in the building of them, that there's still money to be made, even for like people that leave shit there to sell, to rebuy and sell.
Yeah, I don't know how much truth there is to that. I think that let's put it to you this way. I never did an HGTV show about flipping houses because 99% of the flipping house shows are completely made up. Right. And I know that from a fact. I know that from the inside. I know that from people who've done these shows and talked to me about the results. So therefore, I don't know what to believe when it comes to Storage Wars. I'm not saying that they're made up, but at the same time, when you got people pulling $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in items out of a locker that rents for $130 a month, what's the likelihood that person's not going to come pay their 3 months past due rent? I think a lot of that stuff is just TV. That being said, I'm not on the management side. We're developers. We're building these things and handing them off to CubeSmart or Extra Space. They're doing the management. The costs flow through us. But when somebody does get evicted or kicked out or whatever you want to call it, that's got to be public knowledge. It's got to be posted publicly in different newspapers and articles. The owner of that unit or the stuff inside of that unit gets much, much, much more notice than you would think. And, again, if there's 20 grand worth of stuff in there, you gonna let it go? I mean, yeah, I'm sure it happens, but I don't think it happens enough to make a TV show out of it.
Okay. So now, like I said before, now that you're building bigger and bigger products, don't you think that they're starting to get, like, because now I know a lot of them are air conditioned, climate controlled, and cameras everywhere. So they're getting a lot more high tech. I think some of them are even going 2 and 3 levels, right?
Yeah, we just finished one up in New Jersey that's 3-level climate controlled. The climate control itself is about 60,000 square foot. And then we have garages on the outside as well. In most places, you still need a combination of both. The more urban you get, the more you can work off of just climate control and smaller size units and things like that. But when you're in the suburbs, you still got people that want to, park contracting materials and inventory items and things like that, and household goods that don't need to be climate controlled. So there's definitely a combination. I wouldn't say it's moving one way or the other. I just think that there's a demand for both.
All right. So now let me ask you a question. Let's just say you get out of the military today. You want to become an entrepreneur. What would be some of your first moves now in the days that we're living in? We're December 5th, 2022. So what would you get into knowing what you know now in 2022?
Well, I think we finally found our place to land. I think storage is going to be my thing for the long time to come. I don't think we're near, one piece of the puzzle is going to be worth, lots and lots of money. So we're going to stay in this zone. But if I was new and I was just getting out of the military, to go back to your question, we're in the time of social media. So the number one thing you got to do is get the attention of the person that you want to become. Follow these people. Like you just named like 15 people since we started this podcast, Ed Milet and Vaynerchuk and all these guys. I'm not saying you go straight to Ed Milet and message them and hope to get a response, because that's probably not going to happen. No. But, you want to get into self-storage, you're going to find guys like me. You want to get into multifamily, there's guys like me in multifamily. You want to become an amazing baker, message the top bakers in the country and try get in their in their purview, whether you're getting paid or maybe you can afford to take an internship. Not everybody can do that. I get that. But, maybe you have some savings from the military and you spend 2 or 3 months interning for somebody, but you have to lead with value. That person wants to know that you can solve some kind of problem for them, no matter what it is. Our new intern that I just mentioned, he came on board. He was super, super quiet. For the first 2 months, we were kind of scratching our head and we're like, what's this guy going to end up doing for us? Well, turns out he's a hyper computer geek guy. Like he can figure out any application. He can connect the things. He can connect the dots. He can streamline the data. So on our acquisitions team, he's almost invaluable now. He's been here 3-4 months, and he's capable of going through and scraping data and creating lists and figuring out how's our acquisitions team going to get in touch with these guys, creating automations behind the scenes to do all that. So the thing is, he has no background in self-storage. I think a lot of people feel like, well, I'm not qualified because I don't have a background or I don't have a degree. Guess what? In 2022, you don't have to have a degree, in my opinion. What you have to do is learn how to solve problems. And that comes from building a great community, building a great tribe, knowing who to contact, knowing how to figure it out online. There's just so many ways you can solve problems in today's day and age. You don't necessarily need to have a background. I would actually argue that not having a background in the thing is a superpower, because you don't know all the pitfalls and the problems that are created from people who are quote unquote knowledgeable. How many project managers we've hired that are, their shit doesn't stink because they're so good at what they do and they've been doing it for 20 years. And then we go and hire some newbie off the street who does it better than they do because they're not brainwashed with, 20 years of experience. So that would be my thing. Get in touch with the people you want to emulate and be like, and find any way you can possibly to work in their aura, in their tribe, in their team.
And I love that. But one thing you said before that, your whole thing was lead with value.
Lead with value.
For me,
yeah.
I always want to give, even like Gary, my friend Gary said when we had lunch one day, he said, you know what? It's if you promote your friends 10 times more than you promote yourself, you'll never have to promote yourself again. And I
love that.
And, people ask me, well, how did you get David Meltzer, Steve Sims, Robert Kiyosaki to come on your show? Is because I led with value.
Yep.
When I asked them to come on the show, I didn't say, hey, bro, I got a top 5 podcast. I want you to come on. But when Sharon Lecter, her new book came out, I said, Sharon, I would love to have you come on the show. I would love to promote your book to my audience. It created more value. And I always lead with value. So I love what you about that. You have sometimes, like my friend Russell Brunson talks about, sometimes you have to buy your way into the circle. Yeah. Sometimes you have to, like for me, I'm speaking at a Richard Branson event coming up. And the only way I'm able to speak with that is because I interviewed 5 of the 6 people that are going to be there. So they kind of put me there, But I think you got to lead with value and try to work your way without asking to, you should be giving more than asking.
Well, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, and we talk about this a lot, but it's can I pick your brain or can I buy you coffee? Nobody who's successful wants to start with that. But what you could say is, I've been following you for a while. I read your book. I saw this thing in there and I had some questions. Here are the questions. Like anybody who's successful has no problem, if they have the time and the bandwidth, to help people who genuinely put one foot in front of the other. But my favorite thing, Richard, is when people say, hey, can I pick your brain or can I buy you coffee? Sure. What are the top 3 things you want to cover? Right? They can't even come up with an agenda. 99% of the people who want to buy you coffee don't respond to, cool, what are the top 3 things you want to talk about? Because they haven't thought that far in advance, but yet they're willing and open to wasting your hour and a half going to get coffee to quote unquote pick your brain. So when you're coming at somebody and you're asking them for advice or you're asking them to get started, just be a little bit, I call it intelligent and inspired action, right? You have to intelligently engage. You have to show them what you're inspired by so you can actually create value in the relationship, and tell people what you're good at. What are your values? What can you bring to the table? Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking how smart you said that way more eloquently than I would ever be able to say it. But ever since I got into being entrepreneurial the last 3 years, everybody talks about the mindset. Well, I wanted to go back, way back into the 1900s, to talk to who actually started developing these mindsets, and the brain hasn't really changed a hell of a lot since the early 1800s. But something big thing they talked about even back then was masterminds. Mm-hmm. They say the most successful people in the world are a part of a mastermind. And I hear a lot of people say, they ask me, well, yeah, sure, you could just reach out and talk to Steve Sims on the phone. I was like, yeah, but I built that over over time. And I hear, well, I can't afford to go to a Richard Branson event, which I think
Yep.
now it's like $10,000 a plate. I said,
Yep.
but you could go to Branson's team and say, listen, guys, I want to come in. I'll help set up tables. I'll help clear the dishes. I'll take the garbage out.
Yep.
I'll volunteer to help out however I can. And most people, they're going to say yes if you're volunteering free and you're getting the same knowledge as the guy that's paid 15 grand that's sitting there,
Well, I love to that point too, Richard, is a lot of people don't realize this, but when you go to a Tony Robbins event, I went to a UPW 4 or 5 years ago. There's literally hundreds of team members walking around with T-shirts that say Tony Robbins team or something like the UPW team, right? And people sit there and they go, man, this guy's overhead must be crazy. I can't believe how expensive it is to put this thing on. And I'm sure he spends a lot of money. But what most people don't realize is those people, that is like, it's an honor to volunteer to show up to a 3-day UPW and work for 3 days. A lot of those people wearing those T-shirts paid $100 grand a year to be in his private mastermind so that they could go volunteer for 3 days at an event. It's amazing to me. You had said earlier, pay to be in the room. You have to invest to be in the room. I do a lot of private masterminds where I tell people it's not about who's in the room. You're paying for who's not in the room. You're qualifying those who are in the room because they all, not only did they have the money to be able to pay, but they took advantage of it and they acted quickly and they got that ticket, they got that seat. It's the other people who either didn't have the means or didn't think they had the means, because let's be honest, most people have the means and they make excuses why they don't have the means, or they didn't take action fast enough. So guess what? I want to be in the room of action takers who have the ability to build and invest in themselves regularly. How many people go through college and have $200,000, $300,000 worth of debt at the end of their college, but they're terrified to spend $5 grand to be in a room for 2 days with actual action takers who are actually investing in themselves, who actually want to see an outcome. And that's why I'm so energetic and passionate about this piece. Is I've been doing this for years. I've been paying to be in the right rooms for years. And so to your point, how do you have access to all these amazing people? Well, you invested in them, you created value for them, or you paid to be in that room. It's one of those three things. You didn't just buddy your way up to Gary Vaynerchuk, right? You didn't just get him on the podcast by being his friend. You probably invested in him, you invested in his time, or you created value for him in one way or the other.
Yeah, one thing that I do, and this is a hack for anybody that's watching, every Friday, whatever books that I'm reading or I'm studying, I will actually take a snapshot of it and I will actually do a big write-up and I will actually put all the links where they can buy that book and I will tag the author on 15 different platforms. So eventually Russell Brunson said, wait a minute, who is this guy that keeps tagging me? He's trying to sell books, but he doesn't have a code to get anything. And I tell it right in the post, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just letting you know the books that are getting me to where I want to be. And people don't realize that no matter, even if you're Tony Robbins, if you're Ed Milet, if you see somebody's names coming up enough, it eventually is going to click, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So now talk to us about what you're doing now. And I'm really interested about that complex you have going on in Philadelphia. So tell us what you got going on now.
Yeah, I mean, we're building, like I said, we're building self-storage development sites really all over the country. We're from Texas. We're in 5 states now. We're in Texas, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, and Florida. Goal is to be in probably 10 states next year. The goal is to do 100 self-storage facilities in 10 years. We're about 4 years into it. But we're actually on track, believe it or not, because we've built the back-end processes, systems, teams, people, organization. We're working on a fund right now to streamline the financing aspect of things. And, the idea is in the next 12 months or so, we should be on track to do 20 or 25 of these things a year, just based on the people we have working with us right now. So we should easily hit that 100 units in 10 years, like I said, is the goal. And we make a lot of millionaires along the way by doing that. It's not just me and my partner, making a bunch of cash. It's the teams along the way. It's the people inside of our office. It's our executive teams all have equity, all have bonus potential, and they're all tied into the end game. So it's really a cohesive, great culture. of people that I love to work with. So it's just creating the outcome that we've basically mapped out 4 years ago.
But you're also doing something special for veterans, correct?
Yeah, I belong to a couple different things. I have an actual foundation called the Addison Quinn Foundation, where we raise money directly for veterans charities, and I spend a good amount of my time just vetting veterans charities, like making sure that our money is going as close to 100% as possible. Penny dollar for dollar, penny to penny, going into the end game of whatever it is, right? So we've done like wheelchairs for warriors, which they make custom made wheelchairs for vets specific to their needs. This is a little known fact that I learned from the Wheelchairs for Warriors. I can't think of her name right now, the president, but when a vet gets a wheelchair, right, it doesn't matter what their circumstances are. It's just a VA issued wheelchair. It doesn't matter if you lost 2 limbs, 1 limb, if you live near a beach, if you live near a basketball court, so Wheelchairs for Warriors actually custom makes a wheelchair for the Warriors' needs. If they live near a beach, they'll make them a beach wheelchair that can actually take them up and down the beach. If they play basketball, they'll make them a sports specific wheelchair. So a lot of times these guys, obviously have given limbs for us, literally, and they might not have accessibility inside their house for a wheelchair. So it takes these third-party foundations and funds to come up with that money to put the ramp on the front of their house, to widen the doorways, to maybe make their bathroom wheelchair accessible, to again, making sure that they can go do the things that they want to do with their life, if it's going up and down a beach or not. But it's my job to find those great foundations that I think the money is going to directly to the youth, and then create a story around it. And then we've done many different variations of that to different charities over the last I think it's probably been 7 or 8 years since we started that foundation, and I know it's going directly to vets that need it.
And then you said there's an apartment building where it's just going to be nothing but veterans.
Yeah, we actually did a project about a couple years back where I always promise our people will give you give me $100, the vet's getting $100. Well, we actually doubled it. So what we did was, because we were in the construction industry, there was a American Foreign Legion that was nearby our office that had this 4-bedroom apartment above it that was totally out of date, hadn't been renovated since the 50s. Nobody lived up there for 50, 60 years. And we also had a separate charity in Philadelphia that was that basically was mostly homeless vets that would come in and out, and they would get food packages, and there was a small amount of beds there, and they were able to get showers and stuff like that. But that was to augment the VA, which really wasn't covering all the homeless vets that are in Philadelphia. So we actually partnered with the two. We went in and we renovated this apartment, and we actually got Home Depot, because we were spending so much time with Home Depot, money with Home Depot at the time. Home Depot donated most of the materials and a lot of the labor. Then a lot of my subcontractors came in and donated a lot of time and labor. And long story short, this was about a $60,000 renovation that we did to the apartments upstairs and to a little bit of the Foreign Legion downstairs. It cost us $30K out of pocket. So my foundation, Addison Quinn Foundation, actually donated the $30,000 that was necessary to buy some of the labor materials. The other half was donated. So it was basically a $60,000 project that we did for 30. And so I always say, if you gave us 100, 200 went back to the vets for that particular project. So there are times when we can actually get above 100%. But my goal is to make sure we're not giving to charities that have crazy overhead, and they're sending money to God knows what, or they have an executive staff that's getting paid $300,000 a year. I want to make sure this stuff's going directly to the vets that need it.
I love it. So now, like I said, I'm taking credit for your podcast numbers going up. So talk to us about podcast and why you started your podcast.
Yeah, the Legacy Builder, the Legacy Blueprint was it was really started selfishly, right? Like, I just wanted to talk to my friends and find out what they were doing in business, and then literally it kind of snowed a little bit from there. We started out talking single family fix and flip, and I know you had alluded to earlier that you listened to a lot of our episodes. It's really like this though, Richard, right? It's casual, it's talking, it's chatting. Yeah. I want to find out, like, what are their biggest failures? Like, a lot of times it's the failure that catapults us into the trajectory we're supposed to go to, right? So, like when I talked about the first 3 deals I did, I easily could have like folded up and claimed bankruptcy and went and got a real job, but it was the pivot that I needed to learn that, hey, you can only do so many deals with your own money. You can only do so many deals in this market. You can only buy them this way, in this market. You need to learn to buy them a different way. So it literally helped us pivot in 3 or 4 different directions. And I think that every successful entrepreneur has that point in time where they're literally questioning, should I be doing this at all, or should I just go all in? And I think that's the pivotal moment that helps people say, you know what, I fell on my face, but I'm going to get back up and I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it faster. I'm going to do it stronger. I'm going to learn from my mistakes, and I'm going to learn to go out there and do it a different way. And I think, like I said, most of us who have gotten to any level of success have experienced that. And so that's my favorite part about it, is like, we're trying to build a legacy, but you're not going to get to legacy if you just, kind of crumble or become a victim every time something, potentially disastrous happens to you.
And, and I think, like one of my first big guests I ever had come on he's my mentor now. His name is John Lee Dumas. And he's got his podcast has 1 million downloads a month. But, I asked him, what did it feel like to be a tank commander in Iraq and lose 4 of your guys? What was that like, having to deal with your own survivor's guilt and depression? And how did you come out of your depression and almost suicide? And how he became the man he was today? He said, you know what? He said, I've been interviewed 100 times. Nobody's ever asked me that question. I said, because I think the audience is going to learn more from that than they are in having 1 million subscribers.
I couldn't agree more. I call it your favorite failure. I feel like sometimes when that happens to us, now obviously, John Lee's experience is a whole lot different than potential failure in business, but and I don't want to minimize that at all, because I don't know how I would handle that. But I do think there's a lot of times in business where you feel like, you know what, it might be easier to quit. And then you start to take into account all the lives that are going to be impacted if you give up. And, I think that's what helps us get off the mat, stand up again, and go back and swing. And
right about the time I knew I was going to have you on, I had David Meltzer on. Everybody knows the Jerry Maguire story that was written about him. And he told the story on the show about how he had to bankrupt his company, and he lost $100 million at the age of 29. And how now the company he owns with Warren Moon is worth $20 billion. He said because he was at, his wife was watching TV, and she found him with Little John at the Grammys when he was supposed to be working. And she told him, it's either me or the business. And he chose her. And I think he chose wisely. But I think a lot of it, he wouldn't be worth 20 billion if he didn't make that decision to change and lose that 100 million at that time,
Listen, I couldn't agree more. Without getting too personal, I really believe that the storage is the $1 billion business, and we transitioned with some debt. We transitioned with a lot of things that are going to suck in the short term, but I think the long term is huge, and the upside potential is huge. So I can really feel that. I think a lot of people look at the flip business and they're like, man, you were doing so much volume. I don't regret leaving that for a second compared to what we're building on the other side.
Okay, so now how do we find you? How do we support your mission?
Yeah, you can check out storagesyndicate.com is really kind of the lead in there. There's a ton of information about self-storage, about our mastermind, about what we're building, about so many crazy, awesome success stories of folks that had zero experience in real estate that made hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last 12 months doing self-storage and getting involved in self-storage. There's so many ways you can get involved. I think that's the big misnomer, is people look at the industry and they go, man, where do I start? I have folks that have made amazing amounts of money in the last 12 to 18 months with no experience in real estate whatsoever, just helping us go out and find deals, getting equity and getting a piece of the fee for finding a deal, all the way to developers who are finding new ways to acquire shovel-ready storage deals, and accredited investors who are looking for better places to put their money as opposed to the stock market or whatever they might be invested in. And so I truly believe in the industry and the people in the industry. It's a very small industry right now, but it's rapidly growing. And I think it's there's no better time to get involved in today.
I love it, guys. So make sure you check him out. He's got amazing things. He's very easy to get in contact with. He's got a great LinkedIn profile. Definitely check him out. And guys, like my t-shirt says, today I decide. Guys, you make the decision whether you want to be successful or a failure. It's all up to you. Joe, my brother, thank you so much. I appreciate you, brother, and I can't wait to see what you got coming up.
Thanks for having me on, Richard. It was a great time.
All right, brother. God bless.
Same to you.